What is the most ground swallow me up embarrassing moment that's ever happened to you? I ran into an old coworker at McDonald's. Our tenures had overlapped by about a month, and that was several years ago. He recognizes me and calls me over to his friends and tells them, "This is the nicest guy I've ever met." In the next 3 minutes, I called him by the wrong name and asked him how he liked a job he'd never even worked at. It was pretty clear that I hardly remembered him. I was so embarrassed that I got my McDonald's to go and ate it in my car. I'm midway through my burger when him and his friends walk up and get into the car directly facing mine. We made a lot of awkward eye contact while I had my food in my hand, and then they just drove off. FML. Story 2. I'd been seeing this guy for about 3 weeks or so, and he was staying with me for a couple of days. It was early enough that I wasn't quite comfortable with bringing poop into the relationship, as if there's ever really a good time. And so when I started to feel some intestinal distress, I asked him to go to the shop down the street and pick up some wine to have with dinner. He was fine with it, went downstairs and gave me some blessed minutes to relieve myself. It was a crap for the ages. Periods will do that to you. So sending him away was definitely the right call. I went to clean myself up and no toilet paper. None on the roll, none under the sink. The only place I knew I had some was in the back room, where I stored all the non-perishable stuff. Tins, kitchen roll, bleach, that sort of thing. Well, at least I was alone. I waddle down the hallway holding my cheeks apart so as to not make a mess, and I'm about halfway to the back room before I hear a little voice from behind me. What are you doing? Turns out he'd been to the shop in record time, got back without me noticing, and was sitting on my couch watching me do the Kansas crappy shuffle down my hallway. And I'd been presenting my crap-smeared butt to him like some kind of tub girl mating ritual. That was not how I anticipated introducing butt stuff into our relationship. Story 3. It took me a long time to grow into myself. I was bookish, I wore sweater vests, I had one of those sun color changed necklaces. I genuinely thought it might make me look cool, and I hairsprayed my Ross Geller haircut. I was called helmet hair due to my overuse of hairspray. I had a crush on this one girl who was very popular, but she was nice to me a few times, so I kept up the dream. One day, she has a note passed to me in class. Everyone saw it, and I hid it under my desk until I could get home and read it alone. I raced home and rushed into my room, then opened the note. In the note, she said she wanted to ask me something, but was too embarrassed. So could I come talk to her? My heart fluttered, and for about 12 hours, I believed I was this close to having a girlfriend. At school the next day, my friend told me it was probably a trap and just forget about it. But she was nice to me, so I persisted. I walked up to her and said, "We should talk." She motioned that we should go talk in private, away from her friends and our classmates. But I insisted. She just asked me, "So, I heard you really like NSYNC." "Yeah, I love them. I just got the CD last weekend." "So, do you want to go see them with me?" "I'd love to. I'd been wanting to ask you out." "Wait, you're not gay?" She wanted me to be her gay best friend. I was not, and am not, gay. I just liked NSYNC. This was in 6th grade. We were children. Yes, at 30 I realized that your music tastes don't dictate your sexuality. Story 4. I was 13 and my family and I were on a skiing holiday. My parents had decided to sign me up for lessons so that my dad could get some good skiing in, and my mom and sister could relax and drink hot chocolate. My sister had broken her wrist a few weeks prior to leaving, and my mom isn't really a winter sports fan. I had been throwing myself down mountain slopes with about as much grace as a brick, with the tutor occasionally griping about said demeanor, and was exhausted. We had time for one more run, so we all waddled over to the T-bar machine. This imaginatively named device is so called because a metal bar, shaped like an upside-down T, hooks below your butt and drags you upwards, so you're not constantly climbing for 10 minutes and skiing back down in seconds. Somehow, my jacket got caught on the bar, which knocked me to the ground. This is not the embarrassing part. It then dragged me along the snow, past where I was supposed to ski off, and carried on along a very icy patch towards the mountain, where it would turn back. Still not the embarrassing part. The embarrassing part was when the rough ice dragging under me somehow managed to pull down my ski pants, thermals, and underwear, exposing my bare butt cheeks to an entire slope of people and giving me a nasty ice/friction burn down my thighs. Also, I was yelling my head off to get someone to stop the machine. A lot of people saw it. I was finally helped up and off the ice and skied down to the bigger lift to take me back down to the hotel. I cried the entire way down. The real kicker was getting back, telling my family this story while still sobbing through wounded butt and wounded pride, and having my dad and sister howl with laughter while my mom desperately tried to comfort me. Story 5. I was walking with some friends from the dorms to a restaurant or something, and deciding to be silly, started doing this little skippity hop type walk. Lame gag for a laugh, but no one was laughing. We were at the age where guys laugh at every stupid thing their friends do, so I stopped to turn around and see what was up. Before I could turn around, though, I noticed that there was this guy who was somewhat disabled, walking in the opposite direction coming towards us. One half of his body was atrophied and partially paralyzed or something. I don't know what was actually wrong with him, and this caused him to walk with a type of limp very similar but less exaggerated than the skippy hop I was just doing. We made eye contact, and I just looked at the ground and heard one of my friends say, "What the F are you doing?" in this tone that makes me cringe to this day. This was almost a decade ago. On the upside, this was so cringy, if that word is even appropriate, that I think I'm dead inside and I can't feel embarrassment anymore at all. Story 6. I've posted this nightmare before, but here it goes. I was in high school and heavily involved in drama and acting. I was looking for things to audition for outside of school. My mother found an audition for a Renaissance fair. She insisted I audition, as I was being super picky and I did not want to at all, but I ended up agreeing. Flash forward, she tells me auditions are in costume, so she bought me a really cheap, really crappy costume from an iParty-esque website. The audition was at a really waspy country club, so I show up in costume and immediately want to die. I enter the country club and I have no idea where the audition is. There's tons of people in there and they're staring at me and laughing at me like I'm a joke. I am literally almost in tears. Finally, I ask a worker or a server, I have no effing idea where the auditions are, and he gives me directions that makes no sense. So I continue to wander this place for what feels like forever until I find the room. I enter, and the panel looks at me, repressing their laughter. I want to die at this point. They say I am definitely looking the part and prepared for the audition. I was given an audition form and told to fill it out. I asked for a pen. They couldn't find one, so one guy takes this really expensive pen out and gives it to me to borrow. He says he needs it back as it's really expensive. I leave the room, panic and weep, and I flee the country club with this guy's super expensive pen. F that crap. Story 7. I bragged to my sister on how I got 1,000 upvotes on a post on Reddit. My mother, who's very unfamiliar with Reddit, eavesdropped on us and went on to search for the post using the little details I'd given my sister. One day, she straight up told me, "Hey, I found your post that you told your sister." I gulped. I asked her, "Oh, did you find anything else?" She found out about my adult content viewing activities. She then proceeds to tell me that she saw my comments on r/Gone Wild and all that. She then talks about blah, 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 blah. You're 18. It's normal for you to watch adult content. And I'm like, Mom, just stop. I don't need to know that you know I watched that. For your own mother to call you out on it was actually mortifying. I told her respect my privacy and not be so nosy, and I hope she gets the message. Edit. Yeah, I get it. Disclosing my Reddit activities to my sister was a rookie mistake. I have since made an alt account for more personal stuff. Story 9. I was 15, went to an outdoor center with my classmates where we camped overnight and did some activities over 3 days. Anyway, we had a fashion show where all the boys dressed as girls. So the girls dressed me up with a short skirt and whatnot, a crop top. Well, in Ireland it's pretty cold at night in October, so there I am in my mini skirt, freezing my cheeks off, waiting for the fashion show to start, and we go up on the table in front of all my classmates and my boxer shorts are loose and my small, cold, retreating chicken is visible at close proximity to my whole class. The cool guy in my class shouts, "It's like a chicken, but only smaller." And I died a little bit inside. While people laughed and laughed and laughed, I heard a few audible ahs and accompanying sympathetic female faces. The instructors quickly got me down off the table to their credit. Anyway, That moment stuck with me for a long time, and I actually had a bit of trouble with my chicken image for a while, until I realized, hey, I'm perfectly average. Story 10. That time I screamed at a woman over poo. My little village has a small annual dog show. We normally enter our little dog, who has won the friendliest dog and waggiest tail and dog the judge would like to take home in the past. This year, she was unfortunately in season, so we didn't enter to prevent any fuss from the other dogs, but took her along to watch. Halfway across the park, she decided to poo, and I suddenly realized I had forgotten a bag. There were loads of other people with dogs around due to the show, so I wandered away a little to ask someone for a bag. I turned back, and to my horror, a lady was picking up my little dog's mess. Not wanting to feel like one of those a-holes that doesn't clean up, I ran towards her to advise her that she didn't have to do that because I was going to get it. Instead, in a sort of panic, I waved my arms and barked, "No! That's my poo!" Please note that I did not say that is my dog's poo. She physically jumped, then turned a deep red. She sort of mumbled an apology, dropped the poo, and marched off with her dog. It was at that point that I looked to my left and saw my dog's poop sitting a few feet away from the lady's dog mess that she was attempting to pick up. I think about this at night a lot. Story 11. When I was about 16, my parents and I had a massive fight about how I wasn't studying hard enough for my exams. They insisted I was distracted. We were all awful, saying awful things, but my mom takes my phone and forces me to unlock it because she wants to delete my Facebook and social media apps. She goes onto my internet browser as she doesn't know how to delete Facebook from my phone, and she gets into my bookmarks folder. In that bookmarks folder was a folder created by my friends about a year ago labeled My Name's Adult Content Folder, filled with the wildest, grossest adult content that they could think of. I had forgotten about it, and I never got around to deleting it. Sure enough, my mom finds out, so while my dad yells at me, my mom finds what she thinks is my adult content, and she passes out. I have never wanted to die more desperately than I did in that moment. What angered me the most is that they thought I was stupid enough to label my adult content folder in such an obvious manner. Apparently, it's not the best idea to voice this anger in the midst of your mom passing out from shock, your dad yelling at you, and your brother watching from the dining room table. Truly traumatic. Story 12. I matched a true 10 out of 10 girl on Tinder who was a student in the college town where I lived after I graduated. She was absolutely gorgeous, a slim, blue-eyed blonde NCAA swimmer with an unbelievable body and the sexiest girl-next-door demeanor. It was the beginning of the semester, so the weather was still hot and sunny. We decided to meet downtown for dinner and drinks at a nice little gastropub. I parked right out front, and considering the gorgeous weather and the casual atmosphere of the town, I left my windows down. Remember this, it's important later. Dinner was great, the conversation was wonderful, our personalities just clicked, and there was definitely some sexual tension brewing from the chemistry between us. After a few more drinks, we decided we'd walk back to her place. During the walk, I felt the rumblings of a significant gas bubble, but I ignored it. This girl was a 10 out of 10, and into me, I was not about to ruin it. We get back to her place, barely making it into the living room. My worries are behind me, my stomach a distant thought. The next 2 hours was one of the hottest hookups of my life, to say the least. As we're laying there, in the afterglow playing with each other's bodies and pillow talking, the rumblings began again, but with newfound strength. I grimaced slightly and held it back, but I knew a storm was about to erupt. I didn't want to let it blow here, so I suggested we start the 20-minute walk back to our cars. The next 25 minutes were pure agony. We dressed and walked back to the cars, pressure building the entire time. I'm approaching uncharted territory here. I'm not sure my sphincter was going to be able to withstand the rise in PSI. We get to the cars, say our flirty goodbyes, and we part ways. I hop in my car. Oh, my sanctuary, my solitarium. The second that door clicked, I leaned back and let forth the largest, most powerful fart I've ever dealt. 100 psi of bottled butt gas burst forward in the loudest, deepest, most satisfying rush of air. If you had stuck a marble in between my cheeks, I could have shot it through a brick wall. As it released, I closed my eyes and I groaned aloud in relief. I turned to grab my seatbelt and found myself face to face with my date. Remember how the window was down? Yeah, in my haste to get in my car, I didn't realize that she had never began walking to her car and had been standing there the entire time. She watched me get in my car, she watched me lean back, and then she watched and listened as I closed my eyes, groaned and moaned and unearthed the Krakatoa of farts. I wanted to shrivel up and die. To make it even worse, I held eye contact with her as I rolled up the window, put my car in reverse, and then drove off without a word. Needless to say, things didn't exactly work out between us. Story 13. I used to volunteer at a local cable access station when I was a teen. One night we were doing a live debate between locals running for the town council. Very dry stuff, so of course the crew was being silly. There was a 15-minute intermission where we just kept the live feed rolling while someone switched between shots in the studio of the empty Diaz and the candidates talking to the small audience in the studio. The boy I had a crush on, and I had just discovered only 2 nights before, our mutual crush. So when he tugged on my sleeve with a demon in his eyes, I chased him to the bathroom, where we gave each other some sloppy, which of course lasted all of 3 minutes. Coming back to the control booth, everyone else on the crew was in tears, laughing hysterically. We were confused until the station manager managed to quote, in between uncontrollable giggles, various clumsy dirty talk Boy and I had earnestly said to each other. I had a wireless mic in my sweatshirt pocket, and I'd either left it on, or turned it on, or the dead battery kicked out just a little more juice. Regardless, the booth and our viewing audience had been treated to 3 whole minutes of audio of 2 horny boys gagging on chicken and passionately imploring the others to swallow and asking how that male private part tasted. Muffled, quiet, but there nonetheless. Everyone was good-natured about it, but I was mortified. Even decades later, I can feel the cold bile of embarrassment, and it's hard to clear my throat. Story 14. So I'm a dancer and a dance teacher. One day I was walking to the theater, where I had a performance that evening. I lived about 10 miles away, so I decided not to take out my car and lose my parking spot. The walk would serve as a good warm-up anyway. I was in my ballet bun, full makeup, and holding the tutu in my arms. Now, I don't exactly live in a posh neighborhood, so catcalling was a common occurrence, and I loathed it. I used to tell myself, okay, the next time I get catcalled, I will definitely say something and stand up for myself. So while I'm walking, a car suddenly stops beside me, and suddenly a stranger shouts out, "Hey lady, want a lift?" This was my moment. I thought, you, sir, messed with the wrong girl. I summed up all my courage and yelled back, "Keep driving, a-hole!" Filled with pride and relief, I continued to walk along until the car that stopped continued to drive past me. That was when my sense of pride suddenly turned into dread and horrible embarrassment. The guy who yelled at me was the father of one of my young students who was also on the way to the theater. Anyway, I wanted to die over and over again. I got to the theater, apologized profusely to the student, but that wasn't enough. Then the next time I saw the dad at the school, I apologized profusely to him, but that still wasn't enough. It will never be enough. I actually explained that my reaction was caused by sleazy guys in my neighborhood, and he actually laughed it off and thought it was pretty funny. Story 15. So I have a cry reflex that can be triggered by pretty much any situation. Fear, anger, frustration, happiness, you name it, I will probably cry about it. I also have a pretty severe anxiety disorder and tend to catastrophize and assume anything minor going wrong will have apocalyptic consequences. You can probably see how this is a bad combination. When I was 20, first time living on my own and barely scraping the surface of adulthood, I found out the Canada Revenue Agency had my incorrect direct deposit information and my tax returns had been going into the wrong bank account for 3 years. To clarify, I had never given them my banking information. My dad, who did my taxes at the time, had never given them my banking information, and to this day, I still have no idea where they got it. Of course, I start freaking out, thinking I'm going to get in huge trouble and the government is going to take away my student loans or send me to prison or for tax fraud or something else big and irrational like that. So first thing I do is go to the bank to see if I can sort this out through them and figure out maybe if they were the ones who gave away my banking info so I won't get in trouble. They say there's nothing they can do, that my direct deposit information wouldn't have been given out without my consent. My brain basically yells, "You're going to tax prison!" And at the push of a button, I start full-on sobbing in front of the bank teller. I'm talking red eyes, red face, snot running out of my nose. I'm sobbing. The teller is staring at me, wide eyes, clearly not knowing what to do. As I gather up my stuff through my tears, I turn around. The entire line of people is staring at me in confusion, because apparently I was sobbing loudly. I walk out into the mall, because of course this bank was in a busy mall, and I get on the bus to go home, all the while getting stared at by people who are probably debating in their heads whether they should ask me if I'm okay or if I'm dying of embarrassment the entire time, but I can't make myself stop. I get home, I call the revenue agency, and I've somewhat calmed down at this point. But as soon as I come off hold and an actual person picks up, I burst into tears again. I have to try to explain to them the situation while they can barely understand me because of the sobbing, and I'm pretty sure they're getting fed up. And then finally, once I've told them all the details, they basically say they'll handle it. And a couple months later, I got all my money back. All of that embarrassment for nothing. Story 16. I dated a guy who liked to watch adult content. A lot. He was using an old laptop of mine, and when we broke up, I knew I had to do a format/reinstall if I wanted to save the thing. My dad does that for a living, so I took the laptop over there and asked him to do it whenever he had the time. I said, just wipe the whole thing. Nothing there is worth saving. A couple weeks go by and he calls me, says that there are some pictures of me and my ex, as well as the kids and us hanging with our friends. He wants me to look at these pictures before he wipes it just in case there's anything I want. I go over there and I see the pictures and confirm that, no, I really don't want anything, just please wipe it all. My dad made a joke that he'd found the adult content folder and that he'd never seen so many interracial, BBW, butt love making videos in one spot before. I was a bit embarrassed, but nothing compared to what happened next. My mom was in the room and she had a fatal disease. She was in hospice. The end was coming soon, and she heard the words interracial, BBW, butt love making, and woke up from her morphine slumber to ask if my dad and I were talking about sex. I told her we were just talking about my ex's adult content collection, and it was nothing that she could go back to sleep. Wait, there are videos where interracial people do it to each other up the butt? And you have that here? In this house? Dying inside, I told her that, yes, I'd brought over my ex's laptop and I was trying to get it formatted to get all the ugliness off of it. She sat up. She declared, I want to see it. Bring that over here. I was horrified. But Ma, I'm not watching adult content with you. She said she was dying and she's always wanted to see adult content. So she demanded that I let her see it right now. My dad just looked at me helplessly and I took the laptop over to my mom. We scrolled through 2 or 3 videos with her asking, is that the butt part? No, that's the regular part. I want to see the butt part. While I squicked out and my dad hid behind his newspaper, all things were discussed, from chicken size to shaved to butt bleaching, and finally she saw the butt part that she wanted so desperately, and then made me find it again in a few more videos. Eventually, she declared she'd had enough and could now die happy after seeing the butt part. I left to go melt in a puddle of shame. Story 17. At the beginning of college, we had placement exams to see what levels of some courses we should start in. This was a couple months before classes started, so it was the first real opportunity to meet the classmates we'd be living with for the next 4 years. I arrived relatively early and sat down. Others came in and sat near, but not next to me. Wanting to make friends early, as that was not one of my strong points, I wanted to get involved in the conversations going on. But I'm not a very loud person. There was an empty desk in front of me, so I figured I'd smoothly advance up to it so I could chat with the people around it. I stood up, stepped forward, and leaned into the desk so I could introduce myself as I sat down. Unfortunately, these were conjoined desk and chairs that had all the legs under the chair, not the desk bit. So as soon as I leaned on it, it tipped forward and I lost my balance. I tried to catch myself but ended up falling off to the side. I slammed my head into the concrete wall of the classroom and fell on my butt. All conversations immediately stopped so everyone could stare at me. I did not make any friends that day. Story 18. Posted this on another thread a while back. When I was 10 or 11, I went to a fairly large church. I had developed a crush on a beautiful Peruvian lady, Julia, who was probably 23 or so. I took each and every opportunity to talk to her, but I never had anything interesting to say to keep the conversation flowing beyond pleasantries. One day I entered the church from the back door, used by staff as my parents were elders in the church and mainly used the back entrance. This was a couple hours before a service was to take place, and my parents had arrived early to set up sound equipment. There was a long hallway you had to walk through to get to the side entrance of the auditorium. At the end, there were double doors to the auditorium that had a small 10-foot by 20-foot wide rectangular pane of glass on them. There was an event scheduled for later that day in the main auditorium of the building, so there was a spread of finger foods and drinks on a banquet table. As I approached the doors, I spotted Julia in the auditorium sneaking a few morsels from the table. Ha ha! I thought to myself, now this is my chance to make a joke and get a laugh out of her. Thinking this would lead to a long string of future conversations between us due to my hilarity, I bust through the double doors and shouted at her, "Hey, you stay out of there!" with a crap-eating grin. Startled, she turned to me with a shocked expression, not at all amused. I slowly looked to my right toward the center of a massive room and noticed there was a group of about 300 people gathered around a member of the church praying in solemn silence. My face turned 10 shades of red, and I bolted out the back door and hid for a while. My parents were less than thrilled. As it turns out, they were praying for a woman whose husband had just suddenly passed away. Note to self, "Hey, you stay out of there," is not a successful pickup line. Story 19. I've told this story on Reddit before, but it never really got any attention, so I'll share it here. I was 13, sitting casually on the soccer field with a couple of boys and a girlfriend of mine. Trying hard as heck to act casual but being extremely awkward around boys, it didn't work out well for me. One of the boys was basically my childhood sweetheart, although we were on a break because he brought my older sister flowers on Valentine's Day instead of me. Don't ask me why I was still hanging out with him. I had low self-esteem. Anyway, I go to sit back, like with my elbows kind of supporting my upper body. As I lean back, my young body betrays me in the worst way. It happened. As I go to lean back, my butt decides to release some gas very audibly. Everyone starts laughing. My answer? It was my tampon. Yes, I claimed that a tampon inside of me made a fart sound and that I didn't actually fart, but the way I moved made my tampon fart. Why would I do that? I still don't understand the logic behind it. I don't remember anyone's reactions because my insides froze and I just jumped up and ran away. Story 20. In 7th grade, I went with my buddy and his dad to an aquatic center that had one of those surf wave simulators. You could boogie board or surf, and there was a separate line for each, one running up the right side of the wave and the other going down the left, so the wave was lined on both sides, with people watching, everyone else taking their turn. I boogied a couple of times and then decided I wanted to try out some surfing. This was 2008, so wearing big shorts was cool, and I was cool, so I wore big old shorts. I had never surfed before, though. I stepped onto the board, and it got shot out from under me immediately by the water, and my legs flew up in the air in what felt like a cartoon character slipping on a banana type of way. As I came down, I landed butt first, and the water rushed into my oversized swim trunks and blew them clean off. I was now 12 years old, unclothed, flailing on a wave simulator with at least 30 people, including girls, watching me. Eventually, I had to stop fighting to cover myself and just let the water carry me to the top, where I found my swimsuit and attempted to play the whole thing off. Story 21. My time to shine, boys. My life is basically comprised of a series of embarrassing moments. Let's start with the trampoline story. So I was about 12 or 13 and was riding back from the beach with my brother and my grandparents. We stop at my aunt's house and just on the way to say hi and all that. I didn't mind since they're loaded and have a baller pool and a trampoline. Me and my brother immediately run to the trampoline and begin the kid shenanigans. My cousins, who lived at the house, were both girls, which meant they had friends all over all the time who were also girls, so we, of course, decided to show off. My brother yells out, "Double jump!" and I prepare to be bounced extra high to hit a sick backflip. Except I crap myself and am now hurling high up into the air in some awkward aerobatic pose. I smack the trampoline onto my stomach and immediately pop up and run into the house, into the bathroom. My boxers were full of poop. I'm trying my best to scrape some off into the toilet, then washing the rest of it in the sink as quietly and as quickly as possible. I rush the wet, nasty boxers out to the SUV and discreetly try to put them into my suitcase and act like it just never happened. Jumped right into the pool just in case I still had any lingering smell. I got away with it, right? Yeah, that's what I thought too. Until a few months later, it's Christmas, and my family all meets up. First thing out of their mouth, "Hey, remember when you crapped yourself on the trampoline this summer?" Repeated every Christmas and Easter for the past 13 years. Another time in high school, I was sitting in a study hall class. Basically a class for, you didn't qualify for any electives, so we had to put you in this extra room for 405 minutes a day. It's the end of the year, and it's time for our yearly test, which means class times went from 45 minutes to 2 hours. I get to study hall, and since there is no test for study hall, I just sat there quietly for 2 hours. But I was excited. This was the class that my crush was also in, and she sat one desk diagonal in front of me. After a while, I put my head down and I fall asleep, like most of the students did. After some unknown amount of time, I am awakened by a super odd feeling, like someone shook me and growled. I pulled my head up, only to quickly come to the realization that the vibration and sound I noticed was me farting. I farted myself awake. I looked to my right in horror to see most of the class staring at me on the verge of laughter. I'm mortified. I rapidly dart my head to my crush, who still has her head in her arms. But it was as if the gods had heard my cry for salvation and answered sternly, no. Because in my small moment of relief, I noticed her head slowly lift up and look back at me, part puzzled and part disgusted. I'm effing frozen by panic. We locked eyes for a solid 30 seconds. Now, 30 seconds seems super quick, but go ahead right now and stare at something and count to 30. It's an effing long time to be staring at someone and not saying anything. My brain finally un-Fs itself and comes up with a genius plan. The girl behind me is still sleeping. I can blame it on her. So I look back real quick to the sleeping girl, then turn back to my crush, waving my hand in front of my nose and pointing over my shoulder to the girl behind me, and what has to be the worst acting anyone has ever seen. She sees through my ploy, though. She scrunches her face in disgust and pity, rolls her eyes at me, and turns away to put her head back down as I slowly died inside. For this one, I need you all to understand that none of us are 100% good people all the time. We are all sometimes huge a-holes, and this is one of my times. One day I'm at work at a retail job I had. Working there, all of us employees had headphones and to talk to each other over the walkie. I'm back in the TV area when someone comes over radio and says, "Ksh, hey, a solid 10 out of 10 coming through TV land." So I post up to get a good view when she walks by. I see the girl, and while her body was nice, her face was, shreked. I look over to my other coworker, who also posted up near me to see, and he shoots me a interesting kind of face. I hop back on the mic and say, "You thirsty? 'Cause you saw a mirage. I don't know what just passed by here, but it ain't 10 out of 10. Cue a fourth employee comes up over the mic. It's one of the supervisors. He laughs at my joke and says, "Hold up, where is she? I gotta see this crap ASAP." As he's still laughing, I tell him she is headed to the laptops, and that she is the only person over there, so it's an easy spot. I look to the other side of the store to see him beelining for the laptops in a peek. Silence for a few seconds. My supervisor comes back over the mic and says, "Go F yourself. That's my fiance, you little female dog." Quickly, I look over to both of my coworkers who are partaking in this whole ordeal, and they're each now giving the worst of faces my way. My supervisor was ready to full-on fight the three of us and had to be calmed down in the office by the manager. Manager gives the supervisor the rest of the day off, walks out of the office and comes up to three of us and says, "You three are effing stupid." She drops food off to him like 3 times a week. How the F did you not know who she was? The guy next to me says, "If you knew it was her, then why didn't you tell us to shut the F up?" Manager says, "Crap was funny. I wanted to see how that would play out." Story 22. I was at a cheap clothing store with my girlfriend and was looking for a good pair of pants. I was about to enter the changing room until I heard a really good song come on. I really wanted to know the name of the origin of the song, so I pulled up my phone and activated the music app Shazam! The app was having a hard time listening to the track, so I got my phone closer to the speaker. In an outside perspective, I looked like some guy reaching his phone in the air, hovering around the unisex changing closets. I was too stupid to realize how weird this looked until I noticed there was someone in the changing closet just below the speaker I was trying to get my phone closer to. I was mortified. I was so embarrassed and paranoid that I thought everyone thought I was a pervert. My anxiety got so bad that I thought it was a totally great idea to prove my innocence by shouting to my girlfriend, "Hey!" Insert name here. Shazam isn't working. It's not working. Why isn't it working? Needless to say, this really didn't help and only directed everyone's attention onto me. Even worse, a girl came out of the closet. I was hovering my phone around, and last time I checked, she was talking to her friends and directing their attention onto me. My next plan of action was to quickly leave the store, but without looking guilty. So I went up to my girlfriend and told her to hurry up. She got really confused at first, and then really agitated. Not because we were leaving so soon, but because she thought that the only possible reason I could want to leave so badly was that I ran into my ex-girlfriend. Like, why would you think that? So she took an even longer time to get out of the store, and halfway through her transaction, I ended up just walking out. Because the embarrassment was too much, I couldn't do it. I didn't go back to that clothing store for an entire year. Story 23. Rush has been my favorite band since I was a kid in high school. Going back to 1980, 1981, I've been listening to them and attending their concerts since that time. And a few years ago, being older and having more disposable income, I decided to treat myself to a front row ticket to see them in Cleveland. I was seated with a friend to the right of me, right in front of Geddy Lee, the legendary bass player and vocalist of the band. The show was awesome, and we were surrounded by a lot of great people, and I happened to be next to one of the few women who attended the concert. Seriously, Rush is a guy's band for the most part, and we got along great and enjoyed the show together until those that are familiar with Rush's most recent concert tours are aware that Geddy has been touring with a clothes dryer behind him. Now that he no longer needs an amp backline due to improvements in onstage tech, he does it as a joke, partially, and also to be able to use it as place to keep special t-shirts to throw to the audience. He throws out about 5 the whole show. So this is a special deal. To catch one of the shirts even say, "I came out of dryer number 5 on the Vapor Trails tour," and stuff like that. They're collector's items. So Geddy starts throwing shirts out. One comes close, one comes close, one comes to me, and both me and the girl next to me catch it at the same time. Seriously? So here are 2 middle-aged people at the front row of a Rush concert catching a once-in-a-lifetime collector's item at the same time. What do you do? I felt myself visibly groan. I had to make a decision. Do I fight or do I cede? After a moment of pause, excitement, and entitlement, I decided I would have it. I used my considerable male bulk to wring it out of her hands. It was mine! However, immediately I felt like crap. I knew I could not keep it. After a second, I turned to her, getting ready to hand it over and say I was sorry. But she wasn't looking at me. Turns out Geddy had her attention. He had seen the whole thing. My idol of over 35 years had witnessed my moment of selfish, boorish behavior and was leaning over the barrier to give her her own special shirt. The last thing I recall was her saying, "Thank you, Geddy. Thank you. Earth, swallow me. Please." I have never gotten over it. I have no idea where the shirt is today. I even thought about paying for a meet and greet with Geddy so I could tell him I'm not really a horrible person. But then they stopped touring, and I am branded that guy for all of time. Story 24. I had worked hard all year and was nominated to do a speech at 8th grade graduation. I was pretty good at public speaking, so it came naturally to me. Worked in a few jokes, the speech wasn't too long. It was a pretty good speech. The morning of graduation, I feel a little under the weather, but it's spring and allergy season, so I brush it off and take some Claritin. I go up in front of my entire 8th grade class and start speaking. Things are going pretty well, still a bit stuffy, but it's not getting in the way. Then I sneeze, and I block it with my hand. I swear something came out, but nope, there's nothing in my hands. Look down, there's nothing on my shirt. Maybe I'm mistaken. So I go on with the rest of my speech. People are now laughing at my jokes, and I'm feeling a strong self-confidence boost and really lean into my performance. But then I realize everyone's laughing a little too hard at my jokes. They weren't supposed to be that funny. One girl in the front row literally has tears. So I finish my speech and make it a beeline to the bathroom. To my horror, there is a glob of snot and mucus all over the front of my dress. I was wearing a scarf, so I guess when I looked down, the scarf concealed this from me mid-speech. I stood in front of about 300 eighth graders with snot all over me. Turns out I had the flu that day. Oh, and the girl who was 2 seconds from peeing her pants now works for my mom, and I see her almost every day. Story 25. When I was in high school, I was really awkward. Anyways, one year I took a drama class because I needed an elective and it was supposed to be an easy A. One of the projects that we did in the class was we got partnered up with someone and had to do a short scene with them. My drama teacher paired me with this one kid and gave us this romance scene with a kiss in it. 15-year-old kiss virgin me wanted to die because of the stage fright, but I figured we could get out of the kiss by hugging or whatever. This kid had a different idea. I suppose this shouldn't have come as a shock to me because from the time we got paired, he was blatantly hitting on me and telling me I had pretty eyes and stuff. He had some effing nerve because I reciprocated this exactly 0%. Anyways, the day of the scene comes, and this stupid boy tries to tell me that our teacher said we had to do the kiss, otherwise we would fail. I knew this was effing bullcrap, and I basically told him that I would not do the kiss no matter what, stupid boy. But he didn't listen. So we start the scene, and it's fine at first, but then the time comes. The homeboy effing comes at me all puckered up, and I freaked out and lurched backwards so far I lost my balance and fell into 4 chairs. To the tune of the laughter from the entire class. I also forgot every single line that came after that. We still got a B, but it's been about 7 years, and I can still picture it effingly so perfect. Screw you, Eric. Story 26. Almost 40-ish professor here, male. One of my female students this semester, Julie, sits in the front row and came to class one day visibly exhausted. She's normally really engaged and has great disposition. I noticed as she was leaving at the end of class that she had used makeup to cover a pretty serious bruise on the right side of her face, brochure photo for domestic violence bruising. Afterward, I considered sending her an email to ask if she was okay. Then I thought of a dozen reasons why I shouldn't and decided to wait until our next class period. 2 days later, we have class again, and the bruise is still very noticeable. I decide I can't just not check on her, and after class is done, everyone is packing up and filing out past us. I ask her if she can hang out for a moment to chat once everyone leaves. She looks a little confused, but still says sure. 2 other students are just in no gosh dang hurry at all, and they leave Julie and I just kind of waiting in weird silence. They would take no less than another 90+ seconds to get packed up and get the F out. Rather than prolonging the absurdly long wait, I asked her to step out in the hall where thankfully we could be alone. Me, hyper aware of how awkward I am on top of my permanently way above average levels of awkward, trying to make friendly eye contact, but not too friendly, so mostly just crazily blinking. Sorry for the dramatic wait after the unexpected request. It's not, sorry. So, yeah, I noticed you. Well, it looks like you have a pretty noticeable bruise on your cheek, and I would never forgive myself if I didn't say something to see if there is some way I can help or if, and I trail off. Julie, polite, anticipatory smile on her face up until 3 seconds ago, now completely gone and replaced with a look of profound sadness. Oh, yeah, it's actually a pretty large birthmark that covers most of that side of my face. And, well, yeah. Me? Oh, beat. My goodness, I'm so sorry. I just, oh my gosh, I'm okay. Well, at least you don't have to hang around for something that ended up being horribly uncomfortable. An excruciatingly awkward laugh ensued. Julie, heartbreaking smile. Yeah, it's no big deal. I kind of got used to it. She walks away. Me. Well, have a good weekend. And I just trail off and try to forget that this ever happened. Story 27. In junior high, our classes were split into teams, and we did this like mock Olympics thing for a rally. Well, I was reasonably athletic in a class of AP English nerds, so I got to be our class champion. First challenge, in front of the entire school, mind you, was duck sprints. At least that's what the principal called it. Now, I played select soccer at the time, and we did duck sprints all the time in practice. What you do is squat down with your arms behind your back and race and waddle on the balls of your feet while squatted as low to the ground as possible. It looks stupid, but it's a killer on your calves. When she said duck sprints, I was super hyped because I got this, fam. I do these every day. And in my excitement, I tuned out her instructions. Cue the whistle. I squat down low and start waddling, and it's not until I hear the principal on the mic go, well, he better get off the ground. Then I notice everyone else is 10 feet in front of me. Apparently, the instructions that I tuned out in my excitement and arrogance were to bend your elbows like a duck. Think the chicken dance and just sprint to the finish line. Oopsie doopsie, I lost miserably. The entire school was watching, and there were yearbook photos of it forever. I thought I was going to die. Story 28. I matched with a girl on Tinder early spring of last year. She was way out of my league. None of us started writing. The match just kind of laid there. No one did anything about it. The summer passed. I'd uninstalled the app late spring. So one Sunday morning at the end of summer, not hungover but extremely tired, I was on Facebook, browsing. I see a face that I recognize. Not sure from where, and I visit the profile, look at some pictures, and it's of this girl. Super careful not to like anything, since stalking people you're not sure from where you know them is a dangerous business. But nothing made me any wiser to who she was. At lunch the same Sunday, I'm leaving work, and it says on my phone that I have a new friend on Facebook. When I see the name, I shiver. I wasn't the Facebook ninja I set out to be. Somehow I managed to send a friend request to the girl I recognized from somewhere, and at the same moment I realized it was the girl who was way out of my league that I matched with earlier on in Tinder. Mind racing. She must think I'm a real wacko. Adding her on Facebook after not even writing or getting in touch on Tinder in the first place? I panic. But still she accepted the request. I calm down. But that means that I might have a chance after all. I panic again. Being in panic mode for 2 days, I collect the courage to write to her on a Tuesday night. How was your weekend? After I hit send, I'm thinking, what the F? How was your weekend? We're almost done with the week. She will definitely not answer, and I made a complete fool out of myself. To my big surprise, she answers. Sorry, but how do we know each other? Note to self, how was your weekend? Also not a viable pickup line. Story 29. I work at Wendy's, and we have a promotion for 50-cent Frosties going on, and it is starting to get very hot here. So naturally, every store is using up all of their Frosty mix. We happen to be well-stocked with chocolate Frosty mix, and the other store wasn't. So the other store called my manager to ask if they could send an employee to pick up some more mix, and my manager agreed. I work the front, so my manager told me to tell her when somebody from Wyoming comes and asks for some Frosty mix. Dumbfounded, I asked, are you joking? Why would they come all the way from Wyoming? She laughed it off and went to work again, leaving me to my thoughts, asking me why someone in Wyoming would have to come get Frosty mix here in New Mexico. This whole time, I'm just casually talking to them about how weird it is that someone from another state would need mix from us. After a while, they show up. We give them the mix and they go on their way, and I ask again, why would they come from Wyoming? It's so far. Then it hit me. We have a street here in Albuquerque called Wyoming. They weren't coming from another state. They were just a mile from us. I wanted to quit right there because they probably think I'm stupid or something now. Oh, someone help me. Story 30. Brace yourselves. When I was 13, I moved to a new town for my dad's work. A chubby, shy, awkward teen I was, and I didn't fit in well, but I'd made a few friends. My hormones were also raging, and I was crushing hard on a few girls in my homeroom. That year, our school also happened to be raising money for charity, with each homeroom competing to raise the most money for a big end-of-the-year prize. A trip to a water park, and a whole day off of class. We worked hard to raise funds, and on the last day of the contest, we came out victorious. The last morning of the school year, however, I couldn't find my swimming trunks. I don't know what demon arose from the underworld that day and made them disappear, but I was left with no choice. I had to borrow my dad's. He was an average build, middle-aged man, and I was a chubby 13-year-old, so our waistlines unfortunately weren't that different, but there was one big problem. The elastic cord that allows you to fasten the shorts securely in place was nowhere to be found. Oh well, there's no time or money to buy new shorts for the trip, so it's off to school. When we arrive, we get off the bus and rush toward the water park. This place has everything: a giant bucket dropping huge blasts of water from the ceiling, enormous water slides, a lazy river, and the main attraction, a surfing simulator that they just put in a few weeks prior. If you've never seen these before, it's simple. A long row of extremely powerful jets shoot water up a gentle slope, allowing you to ride the resulting wave on a boogie board. I line up with all my classmates, and a few girls I'm attracted to line up right behind me. We're all excited to see how this works, and our teacher, Mr. Wise, is the first to try. He's a fit guy, and he shows off some moves as he stands up, waves to the kids, and even gets down on his stomach and does a barrel roll. A few of the girls start to ooh and ah at his muscular body shredding the waves, and I knew this was the way to their heart. I'll do a mother effing barrel roll. My turn. I hike up my dad trunks, and the attractive young lifeguard hands me a boogie board and sends me to the waves. I hop on, and everything's going well. Check my shorts, on tight. We're good to go, baby. All you gotta do is roll over. It's simple. Just roll over and they'll all fall in love. Oh, I rolled over all right. I got halfway before the force of the waves and my lack of muscle kept me on my back, head down, feet up. Almost immediately, the waves shoot my shorts sky high, completely surpassing my feet and landing on the platform at the top. As the girls in line start to erupt hilariously, I lose my grip on the boogie board and my shriveled, cold, 8th grade chicken is completely exposed for the world to see. I lay there, naked and suspended in the waves, until I eventually flop sideways and the jets have enough resistance to push my massive body to the platform, where the sexy lifeguard lays a hand towel over my genitalia. Fortunately, being the last day of school, I never had to live through what could have only been torture in class the next day. People seem to forget all about it over the summer, but I will never forget the excruciating embarrassment as I pulled those wet, oversized trunks back on and walked past my classmates to sit in shame. Story 31. I was going to a female friend from university's 21st birthday. I was 25 at the time, sporting a beard to help look my age, as I have a bit of a baby face otherwise. And I'd completed another degree prior to my physiotherapy degree with Steph. Age is important here. Anyway, 3/4 of the way there, I realized I'd forgotten the invitation. I remembered the street name but not number, so I called another friend who was going and asked her what the number was. She didn't have it either, but she said she thought it was 18. So I parked my car and got out of this suburban street in a pretty much dead, except for the occasional glow of TVs through the windows. Except number 18, which had lights on and music coming from inside. So I walk up with a bottle of vodka in hand for her birthday present and I knock on the door. Steph's mother answers the door and says, "Can I help you?" I respond, "I'm here for the party. I'm a friend of Steph's." She looks a bit puzzled, says, "No worries, come in." So I walk escorted through the house. Definitely a party going on, but I don't recognize anyone here. And older family members are looking at me with a bit of wariness and concern. The majority of the crowd are around 14 to 15. I get taken to the other side of the house into a bedroom where a girl of about 18, also named Steph, who attends a university, is sitting on her bed with 2 female friends out of the way of her younger sister's 15th birthday. I look at her and say, "I don't know you," and look at her mom and say, "I'm in the wrong house," and I feel like the biggest creep on the planet. At this point, they all pee themselves laughing at me. Very fortunately, the mother quickly comes to my rescue and puts 2 and 2 together, and actually knows the other Steph who lives on the street, and walks me to her house, all the while me feeling like I've been branded a predator by everyone else in that household. Story 32. Literally just graduated from high school today. The most embarrassing thing to happen in my life had to be this senior year. This new girl in school, blonde, fit, cheerleader, the whole 9, gets my number from a friend of mine. We talk some, and I somehow end up getting a date with her to the movies. I know, and all my friends know this chick is way out of my league. I'm in rookie ball. This chick is a top 50 prospect that got an $8 million signing bonus right out of high school. We go on this date, and it goes decent. Nothing crazy, nothing bad either. On the whole car ride home, she controls the aux and plays nothing but romance, kiss me slow type music. I pick up on the hint here. She wants to kiss me, and that was totally okay with me. Let me preface this by saying I am a very shy guy, and had only kissed one other girl previous to this. So we get home, and I walk her up to her garage door. I know it's coming, but for some reason my brain wants to avoid it so we can make some small talk up. Then out of nowhere, she hits me with it. Are you going to kiss me already? So at this point, I'm so nervous, but I can't say no to this hot chick. So of course I say, yeah, I was getting to that. So we kiss. And let me tell you, it demoralized me. I go in for just a peck since it was the first date and wasn't expecting anything more. This girl starts French kissing me off the bat, so I'm not prepared for this, and I start doing my best to adjust, but it's all going to crap. I end up licking her lips instead, and then at some point she stops, looks at me, laughs in my face, and then goes inside without another word. She texts me the next morning saying, we're better off as friends. Fatality. Story 33. I was at a large event in my hometown, a soft launch for a medical bioengineering company. It was a big deal because it was the first company in the city to focus on developing artificial tissue growth, growing skin, lungs, etc. I was a freelance writer at the time, so I was covering the event for a story. While doing interviews, I spotted a girl I recognized from high school. We locked eyes, and both had that moment of recognition followed by the realization that we now had to acknowledge each other. I did not remember this girl's name for the life of me. I hadn't seen her in almost 10 years, and we weren't friends in school. We exchanged pleasantries, and I found out she was actually the personal secretary for the local business tycoon that owned the company. This was incredibly useful for me, as I could use her to get more information about their plan. The spokespeople for the business could only say so much to me because of how this whole thing was. So now I had a transition from a social conversation to a business conversation, but I still don't know her name, and I can't quote her in the article or establish an ongoing relationship. What follows still keeps me up at night. Thinking myself smooth, I hold my recorder up to her face and ask her a question, and follow it with, "And please state your name for the record," with a big effing stupid grin. She stops, dead in her tracks, and looks at me with the coldest, most irritated expression I have ever seen grace a young lady's face. Her pregnant pause speaks volumes. Her glare states, without words, "I can't believe you forgot my name, and I really can't believe you just tried to do that." Her voice dripping with condescension, she leans way into the recorder and says loudly, emphasizing every syllable, "No comment." Withering under her venomous gaze, I politely end the interview and escape into the crowd. Story 34. Oh, one I can answer. I was in middle school, 7th grade. Let me just preface this by saying I was pretty much all limbs in middle school. Super tall, gangly, and way more confident than I probably should have been in my athletic abilities, having never actually played a sport. Anyway, it was gym class, and it was just starting to warm up outside, so instead of running laps in the gym, we got to play dodgeball outside. To get to the field, you basically had to walk behind the building, and along the building, there were post and chain fences. On the way back from class, for some reason, I got it into my head that I wanted to hop over one of those fences. Seemed easy enough. Before I got my running start, though, I consulted with my best friend at the time. I think the conversation went something like this. "I'm going to go hop that fence." To which she replied, "I don't think you should do that." And then I got a running start with all the confidence of an idiot. I tripped over the fence face first in front of the entire gym class, 2 or 3 individual teachers, entire class for that period, so 60 to 90 other middle schoolers. You may be thinking, that's the embarrassing part, or even the fact that people were surprised to see me in class later that day and a few days afterwards. Because you see, rather than just jump right back up and pretend that all was well, I laid on the ground in hopes that people would simply walk by. I thought some 12 to 14-year-old middle schoolers would walk by. Be like, nothing to see here, just an unseemly tall middle school girl lying on the ground. I laid there for so long. I tripped so hard that by the time I made it to class, the rumor going around was that I had died. And that still wasn't the worst part. I made it through that year, and due to district lines being redrawn that summer, I even finished middle school in a totally different school. 8th grade was a breeze, but it all came tumbling back down in 9th grade. I'm about halfway through 9th grade at this point. I'm in gym class. Yeah, some real full circle bull crap, I know. And it's raining outside or something because we're all in gym, just kind of sitting around talking. And by we, I mean a couple of my friends and my crush. We'll call him Andy. How we got on the topic, I will never know. But my friend Cody says something to the effect that I didn't know him in 7th grade, but he knew me because of the gym incident. Well, I started getting all clammy. It was like I'd been on the lam for years and my old life was just catching up to me. Anyway, just as I was about to flat out lie and deny everything, a look of recognition comes over my crush Andy's face and my heart sunk. His eyes lit up as I watched the world I'd so carefully created burn down right before my very eyes. That was you? I moved here in 8th grade and they told us about an incident where a girl tripped over one of the fences face first on like the first day of gym. You see, I'd become a cautionary tale for future students. So not only did I have to live with that initial embarrassment, I also had to live with Andy, having a face to go with a tail and being immortalized by way of first day of school handbook procedures. Story 35. In the 80s, during summer, cliff jumping off the Clam and La Hala was common, especially when the ocean temp was above 72. The Clam is not that high, maybe 30 feet or less. The water is deep. There's obviously some dangerous scenarios, but on this late morning it was hot, and the water was warm, and it was pretty safe. My older brother just drove to check it out, since we were already in our trunks, headed for the beach. We got to the Clam, and it was crowded with jumpers, and it looked way too scary for my 9-year-old self. My brother took his turn and dove off fairly unremarkably, climbed back and said, "Your turn." There was no effing way I was jumping. None. I could swim well, and I loved the ocean, but that? I was terrified of the height. Then some people came over and asked, "What's wrong?" My brother said, "He's too scared to jump." And they tried to soothe me. Those 5 people turned to 10. They began to chant, "Jump, jump, jump, jump." Out of nowhere, 8 Navy SEALs popped up to the surface with rebreathers and gear and wanted to know what was happening. The crowd shouted down, "Some kid up here is afraid to jump." So then the SEALs started chanting, "Jump, jump, jump, jump." By this time, the whole cove is chanting, and the local paper, La Hala Light, materialized and wanted to know my name for a story and asked, "Excuse me, are you going to jump?" I was mortified. 40 to 50 people on the cliff and in the water beginning to chant my name to jump. Then a grandma in her late 70s took my hand and said, "Let's do it together." The whole place cheered and started to count down from 10. I walked with her slowly to the edge. Everyone was beaming. 3, 2, 1. And I jumped, and I let her hand go in midair. She landed in the water, and I never left the edge. The entire place booed with thumbs down. "Boo! That was disgraceful!" The SEALs looked physically ill and swam off. The press said, "Well, there's no story for that," and left. My brother looked horrified and said, "I can't believe you let go of that woman's hand. I think those SEALs want to kick your butt." Everyone else shook their heads. They all mumbled and walked away. My stomach was so queasy, and I was so embarrassed. But at least I didn't jump off a cliff like everyone else. But maybe I should have. Years later, I jumped almost every day for a whole summer, remembering that old woman hovering over the ocean. Now, it's illegal. Story 36. It happened during a game where I played women's college volleyball for a D2 school. The stands were packed, and it was the usual setup of the bench being on the floor with our backs to the crowd. I had just subbed out and always sat at the very end where the very whiny and prissy assistant coach liked to hang out so she could shout instructions to the players. She was just a few years older than me, and our high schools were huge rivals. So of course we kind of just low-key hated each other, but acted like typical two-faced females towards one another. We totally tolerated each other for the sake of the team and got along well enough most of the time. I should mention that the team always wore those pull-away wind pants that we'd all joke around and jerk a button loose, never resulting in anything but a flash of our uniform shorts we always wore underneath. So anyways, I was all hyped up, getting out and high-fiving the bench down to the end. Getting out and high-fiving the bench down to the end, and when I plopped down into my chair, I kind of absent-mindedly plucked at one of her pant buttons. It was the top button, so the sudden release of tension off the elastic waistband caused a quick domino effect. Instead of only one button unsnapping, literally the whole side of her pants just whipped open and fell down. And I immediately saw that not only did she not have shorts on underneath, but she had a black, lacy thong, revealing her bare cheeks to the entire gymnasium stands behind us. My heart stopped. Her mouth dropped open. She yelled, "You female dog," and proceeded to haul bare butt to the locker room, trying to hold her pants up and on the entire way. So while she was undoubtedly having her own "ground, please swallow me up" moment, my humiliating moment happened when I realized that the volley had ended and the entire gymnasium was collectively staring, laughing, scowling at me while I sat there mortified. I really wanted to die, but I was due to sub back into the game in just a couple rotations, so I was unable to run for my life and save face like she was able to. I still cringe so hard when I think about it. We were not so friendly after that. Story 37. Okay, so this is going to get heavy and long, so apologies ahead of time. When I was a kid, around 11 or 12, my parents came home from a vacation in the Caribbean. They brought my siblings and I souvenirs, small tchotchkes you'd usually find in the gift shops. Things like shell necklaces or t-shirts. One of the gifts they got me was this small stone figure of a woman. It wasn't very realistic, it looked more impressionist than anything else. It didn't have a face, save for a ridge where the nose should be, no arms, no feet, but it did have a very exaggerated curve. But to my preteen mind, that was enough to get my fantasies rolling. I learned to self-massage while staring at that statue. Now I want you to understand that when I saw this statue, it was only the sexual stimulation I had during puberty. I mean it. This was in the 90s. There were no smartphones. I didn't have a computer, and I was too chicken to try to get any racy magazines for my room. It soon became routine for me to stare at this doll. Is it called a doll? I don't know. While I massaged myself to sleep at night, it sadly didn't take long for me to start touching it as well. I won't go into details, but part of that toy got worn smooth. This would just be a weird story if I stopped there, but sadly it didn't. When I finally did get a computer in my room at about age 15, I had access to more normal adult content. I found I got bored with it pretty quickly. For reasons I couldn't really figure at the time, I'd much prefer to go to artistic websites or museum galleries, specifically ones with sculptures. Yeah, you probably see where this is going. It wasn't until I was out at the mall with my mom shopping for back-to-school clothes and she left me alone near some mannequins that I started to realize what was happening to me. As normal with any bored teenager, my eyes started to wander, and it slowly occurred to me that I wasn't staring at any of the cute girls my age walking by, but rather at the skimpy clothes draped over the mannequins. I was entranced by their smooth curves, their slim bodies. I even snuck in when no one was looking and ran my fingers over the butt of one while no one was looking. It was the most erotic experience of my life, and I realized quickly that getting excited while out shopping with my mom was the last thing I wanted. Fortunately, I was able to calm down before she found me again, and I resolutely decided then and there to stay the heck away from mannequins and statues from now on. Unfortunately, it didn't work that way. As I got older, I got more and more specific with my fetish. I'd start to collect my favorite pictures of naked statues in a secret folder on my computer. I think it was on one of the Windows subfolders. I even discovered websites for people with this attraction, agalmatophilia, and started to earn some friends. However, the shame of my kink never quite went away, and as you can guess, this really started to take a toll on my mental health. I started to go through cycles of self-hate, which would result in me indulging in my statue adult content, which would give me a brief boost of joy followed by more self-hate. My self-esteem was shot. I never managed to get a girlfriend, I think partially due to my weird proclivities. So that didn't help either. At some point, I decided I'd drown out these weird impulses with other adult content, or I would die trying. It was a really stupid idea in retrospect, but it was the best a lonely, effed up virgin like me could have come up with at the time. That was how I discovered BDSM, specifically tying girls up and spanking them. I don't know why I was attracted to that when all the other adult content did nothing for me. Maybe it had something to do with immobilization? From all the years I spent fondling my original doll? I don't know, but it confused the heck out of me at the time. I couldn't decide if I was relieved, I found another outlet for my sexuality, or disgusted that the only other kink was so abnormal. I was raised a very sheltered boy. It all came to a head when my family went out at part of a company picnic. At one place in this park, there were some stone statues of people. Athletes, I think? And there were these guys in batting positions, runners, crouched and ready to run. The one that stuck out to me, though, was a girl in a ponytail, juggling a soccer ball. She was on one foot, the ball resting on her other raised foot, and the sculptor did a really good job at adding the feeling of motion to her form. He also did a good job of rendering her very short shorts. Her thighs were so smooth, I'm ashamed to admit I had to give in and touch. This statue garden was off in a small section of the park, away from prying eyes, but I still remember my heart racing. It was terrifying, but I couldn't stop myself. I ran my hands all over that girl's statue, tracing every crevice of her stone body. It was embarrassing but too exciting to stop. No one had come over by the time I'd run my hands over every inch of her, so I'd gotten bolder and wanted to try mixing my two fetishes for the first time. I stood behind her, admiring her well-sculpted butt, and gave her a good hard smack. And holy balls, it hurt. I didn't hold back, no experience with it before, and I honestly thought I'd broken my hand. It was swelling and throbbing, and it took everything I had not to cry out in pain, or I knew someone would come over and I'd have to explain myself that I was just there, smacking the statue's butt. So I stood there, holding my hand and biting my tongue to keep quiet, wondering how I'd gotten to this point in my life. It was then, having just tried spanking a statue, that I knew I'd hit rock bottom. Story 38. So I work at a little tiny hardware store in the middle of a town, right? I'm not the strongest person, but I have and will continue to lift what I can for customers. Well, if I can ever show my face in that store again, that is. Why? Well, the other day I was loading some potting soil for someone who may be the sweetest old man in the world. One of those little old fragile people who has that wheezy, worrisome breathing and probably hands out Werther's original caramels by the truckload. Anyway, I was loading his potting soil, 4 50-pound bags, using our wheelbarrow, down to his little gray Subaru, which sat on the downward section of an incline. I maneuvered the barrow, yeah that's right, I called it a barrow, over and grabbed a bag out and hopped down the incline. This is where I effed up. Soon as my left foot hit the ground, I heard a solid crunch sound. And of course, while I may not be the most awkward person on the planet, though I hope they don't die anytime soon, I let out an extremely embarrassing kind of sound. The sweet little old man made a confused noise and for some reason yelled, "Oh no!" while I crumpled on the ground with my foot twisted like a curly cheese puff. Not to be outdone in any amount of sheer embarrassment, I immediately bounced back up and keeled over because my foot felt entirely numb. So what do I do then? In my panicked, socially awkward state, I start guffawing and crawling to safety, which in my mind is behind the wheelbarrow. So here I am, a full-grown man crawling on the ground and full-on yucking like Goofy. At this point, we probably looked like some sort of circus spectacle. Me crawling on the ground and boisterously hee-hawing and the old man tiptoeing and oh no. Anyways, I gathered myself somehow, beat red and do a brisk, self-reassuring walk around his car, more out of instinct than brain power. Once I got the feeling back in my foot, I loaded his soil, gave a brisk goodbye, and headed back inside. I spent the rest of the day hiding behind the register and limping around, metaphorically licking my wounds, my ego. It's probably sprained or something, though with my luck, I probably amputated it from the inside or something, and it'll fall off within the next few days. Yippee! Story 39. It was during high school PE that it went down, and on that fateful day, we had gym class. We were doing some sort of warming up exercise on the mats, and that's when it happened. My mate grabbed my shorts from behind and pulled them down as hard as he could. Unfortunately for me, he removed considerably more than he intended to. And there I stood, butt naked with a semi-RB, a random springer. To make matters worse, at that very moment, the teacher called for everyone to settle down, and as the commotion ceased, people turned and pointed in disbelief at the exposed albino. The wild whispering rapidly raced through the crowd and shortly turned into manic laughter. The sheer shock of it froze both me and my friend in place. Him, for he had gotten considerably more than he had bargained for, and me, well, as the realization of what had occurred hit me, my eyes locked onto the eyes of my crush, sat across the room, who covered her mouth with her hand and started laughing with her friends. I then proceeded to awkwardly wrestle my friend for my clothes back that were sadly sagging at my ankles. At that age, your reputation or status within school is a great deal more important than it probably should be, so it's safe to say this ruined my confidence. I pulled a lot of pranks with my friends that year, and you gotta be able to take what you can dish out. But that one really got me. I did eventually get my friend back, but that is a story for another time. Story 40. I am going to deeply regret posting this, but here it goes. My first job, paid intern, male, age 22. I had an appointment with our contracting office that took weeks to get to pick up some reports, so I dressed up a little. However, that morning, my boss realized a report was due that required a sample from a place 20 miles from my office. I raced up there, got the sample, 2 hours in the sun, took it back to the lab, and got back into my car to move it, just in time for the appointment. Apparently, my cheap wool slacks had stuck to my leg from all the sweating from running around, and they seemed to split from the crotch to belt right up the back. A total butt exposure. TBE. I could not miss the appointment, though, so I went in and sat down in the waiting room and picked up a few magazines. My appointment came out and took me back to his office, and I managed to keep the magazines behind me the whole time, except the reports were in bankers' boxes in their basement. There was a bit of an awkward moment when he wanted me to go downstairs first. I declined. I said no. There were 3 boxes. He could carry the 2 lighter ones, but that left me with the 1 box that took 2 hands to carry, so I couldn't hold my magazines. Again, I insisted he go upstairs first. I was feeling pretty confident. I was about to make my great escape after all. I was halfway up the stairs when I heard high heels on the steps behind me. Story 41. This happened while I was in 10th grade, so firstly, I was an extremely awkward person. Couldn't look anybody in the eye, could only talk to 2 girls, and I had no confidence at all. So I was walking with a friend of mine, the girl one, and she said she had to tell me something, but needs the 2 girls' approval. I carried about my business for 30 minutes and honestly forgot about it. Then all of a sudden, girl 1 runs up to me and says, all right, I got girl 2's approval. So she pulls me into a hallway and tells me, girl 2 wants you to know that she likes you too. Now, I don't do the whole talking thing well, and I've never had anyone interested in me before, and girl 2 is someone I would never like in any way that isn't platonic. So I'm standing there for a good 5 seconds, carefully detailing what I'm going to say, but all that ended up coming out was, what do you mean, 2? Now that isn't good, but it wasn't horrible. It was only after noticing girl 1's shocked face that I found out girl 2 was legitimately inches away and listening to the conversation. I just walked away and avoided them both as best as I could for the remaining 2 hours I had to spend there. It was awkward. I received many dirty looks from both girls and their friends, so 2 hours passed, and I had relived the before-mentioned conversation about 1,000 times in my head, but finally I was allowed to go home, and to leave I had to walk down the hallway again. So while I turned to exit the hallway, girl 1 and 2 were hugging, and girl 2 was crying heavily. I just ended up walking past them and nodding awkwardly for the 20 steps it took to get to the store. This scarred me. I sat in my car for 10 minutes because I felt so bad for saying something rude in front of someone, and I was mad that I wasn't able to bring myself to talk to her afterwards. This happened 5 years ago, and I still believe it's the most awkward thing I've ever done. Story 42. In 8th grade, there was this thing going around about how if you touched someone's belly button for 5+ seconds, it was considered SA. For some reason, we always made a joke out of it and touched each other's belly buttons and called it SA, haha. So one day we were waiting for our parents to pick us up, and I wanted to draw something, but I didn't have any ideas. So I was going to ask one of my friends what to draw. He was talking to someone else, so naturally I started nagging him until he responded. After a while, repeating the same phrase over and over was getting taken over by muscle memory, and he still didn't respond, so I started poking him. He was standing next to me, and I was sitting down, so prime poking spot was about the belly button area, which made me think about the SA thing. So the entire class was in conversation, and by either extreme coincidence or some divine joke, everyone had some sort of pause. There was just a moment of silence. Right when that happened was when my tongue decided to mix up the words draw and SA. The teacher was walking right behind me when I said, hey, what should I SA? Story 43. I worked at an audio post facility, and my boss came in with this guy named George, who had 2 cassette tapes in his hand. He looks at me and says, please make me 2 CDs of each tape. Do not listen to these or make copies for yourself. They are my personal property. 10-4, boss, I say and make the dupes. I didn't really want to go against his wishes, but I did have to QA and check to make sure the audio actually recorded, front, middle, and back. I check about 2 seconds of each CD and start to realize what I have here are Bob Marley rehearsal tapes. F that, I'm making my own copy. I give him his originals and the dupes and take my CD and begin to listen to what I have now figured out to be 2 hours of the Exodus tour being rehearsed with non-background singers. Just Bob, Peter, Bunny, and the rest of the musicians. It's solid effing gold. 10 years later, I don't give it out to anyone. I just enjoy it myself and with friends when they are over. My brother has a housewarming party and invited me to meet a neighbor of his who is a huge Bob Marley aficionado. I tell him the story I just wrote to you above, thinking he would enjoy this gem that I have. He responds by saying, "That was me who told you not to listen to or copy my tapes, and now you're here trying to give them away to me?" I said, "Yes," and I just kind of shuffled away in classic embarrassed form while he stared daggers at me. I couldn't say anything to recuperate. I just walked away and found some corner to chill in. Story 44. I was around the age of 12 and visiting family for the holiday season. Being an only child, my cousins and uncle thought I didn't get enough tough love. During this time, they decided they were going to tease me by calling me a heterosexual. I knew what the word homosexual meant at this time, but not what heterosexual meant. So I concluded in my head that they meant the same thing. When they would call me heterosexual, I would reply, "I'm not gay," and storm off. After a week of this, I started to get really ticked off. I started asking my mom what it meant, and she would just laugh at me. A couple days later, we go out to a decently fancy restaurant. In the middle of dinner, my uncle calls me a heterosexual once again. Something snapped in my mind and I lost it. I stood up on top of the table and shouted at the top of my lungs, "I am not a heterosexual!" The restaurant came to a screeching halt. It was so quiet you could hear a pin drop from across the room. I stared at the rest of the restaurant, only to see people with their mouths open looking at me. I finally realized what that word meant and what I had just stated to a bunch of strangers. I instantly dove under the table and started crying. My whole family started crying from laughing. Till this day, I still hear the story being told by my family to all of their friends again and again and again. Story 45. Throwaway. Thread is 8 hours old, so this will be buried, but whatever. Maybe 10 years ago, I was at a popular rope swim in the woods behind some houses on a lake, and plenty of people frequented it, even though it was a bit out of the way. Everybody's drinking and jumping and having a grand old time, and there's a few different groups of people, some interacting with others and some people keeping to themselves. I was with my brother, who knows a lot of people, and of course a random group shows up and he knows them and we start interacting. I was a bit of an awkward kid in high school, and so I was in a phase where I realized that and tried to break out of my shell a bit, and I just tried to be outgoing. Sometimes it ended up being awkward when I had a lot of energy to talk to people, but I just couldn't think of the right things to say, so I'd stutter or made off-color jokes or whatever in an attempt to be outgoing. Well, there was a point where someone kind of ate it and face-planted into the water, and we're all laughing. They get out of the water more embarrassed than hurt. At some point, someone mentioned a particular girl, a friend of this random group that showed up that we'll call Emily, that I had only known in passing and hadn't seen in a while. They mentioned how she had a bad fall, but they seemed to keep it somewhat lighthearted. So I figured it was no big deal and was similar to what we just saw. And so the conversation went something like, "Oh man, that was bad, but wasn't as bad as Emily's fall. Anyway, how's your face? That didn't look fun." The group laughs. And me thinking I could make a joke and make people laugh too, I say, "Well, it's not like Emily's face could have been any more messed up, right?" Laughs at my own joke. Nobody laughs. They stare at me or look at the ground. My brother is beet red. Besides the fact that my joke didn't make any sense, it was insensitive to someone I didn't even know and was making said joke in front of her friends. Turns out she had to get reconstructive surgery not 1 month prior to the fall. She hit rocks head on and got a concussion and knocked out 11 teeth. I didn't know any of this until my brother pulled me aside and told me, and I wanted to effing die. It's been 10 years, and they've probably forgot about it, but I'm too embarrassed now to make amends about it for fear of reminding them. So yeah, that was about a 9 out of 10 on the F me, what did I just say scale. Story 46. It was my sophomore year of college, and I was a music major in marching band. I'd started to develop a friendship with this guy, Tyler, who I also had several classes with throughout the day. Tyler had blonde hair, always wore a red shirt, and it was our school color, black Puma sunglasses, khaki shorts, and had a white-cased iPhone 4. Well, Tyler decided we were on that level of friendship where it was appropriate for him to give me purple nurples, as 19-year-old men do, and a back-and-forth match that lasted for roughly 2 weeks ensued. He would take off full sprint in the middle of practicing a drill on the field to pinch me in the chest while the other 248 students were, marching, playing their instruments. I guess the director found it as entertaining as Tyler did, or was hoping natural selection would run its course and Tyler would fall and stab himself through the skull with his mouthpiece. Anyways, after the 2 weeks of tender boobies, I stopped the nonsense, and he did not. After a week free of retaliation, I decided I would end this once and for all and unleash the wrath of God on his nipples and basically attempt to remove it from him. It was a Friday, and I was walking out of the Fine Arts building to get my car from the dorms to go to marching band. Then I saw him. Same blonde hair, same facial hair, glasses, cell phone, shirt, and khaki shorts he always had on. I gave a wave, and he was just grabbing his phone. This is it, I told myself. This is where I strike. As I walked by him on his left side, I reached over with my right arm and got myself a nice handful and grip with an unearthly force of hell and pulled down hard enough to make one of his legs buckle beneath him. As I turned around with a massive crap-eating smirk on my face, Tyler removed his glasses to reveal that he was in fact not Tyler. Story 47. In high school, I'd been kind of dating this girl. This girl was and is great and incredibly nice. But earlier in that year, her brother had died from cancer, and she was still doing a lot of processing and dealing with the emotions of it. Now, today, I think I've made some really big strides in being supportive, being a good listener when people share their emotions, and being more open about sharing my own feelings. However, high school freshman me was not all that comfortable sharing, healing, or dealing with emotions. At that point, I did everything to avoid talking about my or anyone's emotions. Now, she had mentioned her brother before, and every time it came up, I tried to shut it down. I'd say something dumb like, "Wow, that's really sad, sorry," and let's move on. But one day she wasn't feeling great when we were talking. She took out this photograph. It was the last photo of her and her brother ever. It was a heartbreaking picture of them embracing in a hospital bed, sobbing. It was a brutally sad photo. She showed it to me, and I tried to do my usual thing and say, "Wow, that sucks," or something dumb. She isn't having any of it this time. She looks at me and asks, "What do you think of this picture?" I had already sensed that this conversation is turning emotional, but this question notched it up a level. So I freak out. In my mind, I've gone to DEFCON 5. On the inside, alarms are going off. This is bad. This is very, very bad. I've been quiet for too long. Now my mind is racing. I've got to say something. So I look at her. I look down at the picture. I look back up at her, and I blurt out, "Hey, you're wearing the same shirt in the picture as you are today." Which was true. It was a silly blue Cookie Monster shirt, but it was just a completely inappropriate thing to say at the time. It may have been the least appropriate thing to say at that moment. She was pretty baffled by my response, rightfully so. Needless to say, the heavy mood was killed, and we moved on. At that moment, I didn't realize how terrible of a thing it was to say. I really thought I had successfully diffused the situation. But we broke up a week or so later, and that's about when it set in how horrible of a thing it was to say. Thankfully, we did remain good friends, and we've ended up going to senior prom together. Story 48. This will probably be buried, but here it goes. So in the TV show The League, there is a scene where Ruxin, Nick Kroll, gets mad at someone and says, "I hope it dies of something painful. I hope he gets mouth cancer," or something to that effect. I thought it was pretty funny. A week later, I'm playing an Xbox game online with two of my childhood friends who are brothers. I get a little heated at some other player we are playing with, and the quote from The League pops in my head, so I say, "I hope he dies of something painful. I hope he gets mouth cancer." But there's no laughter, no comments, only silence. My face goes white as I remember their father had died from mouth cancer a couple weeks before, and it just slipped my mind. We were playing to get their minds off of it all. I immediately say, "I have to go." They say, "Yeah, us too." I cringed so hard and internally berated myself for months. I spent the next few months doing everything I could to help them get their father's affairs in order and did whatever I could to help be supportive, but I never forgave myself for that and can only hope that they have somehow forgotten about it. I am still friends with them and still talk to them, but none of us have ever brought this up with each other. Maybe I'll have them watch that episode of The League sometime, pause it after that scene, and then explain it to them. Story 49. A couple years ago, I was taking the bus to work. Before the bus arrived, I went into a store. Bus stop is 10 seconds from the store entrance to buy my lunch. I was in the self-checkout, which has a window overlooking the car park, and the bus stop just behind it. I saw my bus pull up just as I finished, so I grabbed everything as fast as I could. My bag, my food, the change from the self-service machine, and tried to get the right amount of money to buy a bus ticket all at the same time. I tried to signal the bus driver that I was on my way as I was hobbling out the store through the car park, and the bus was packed. I proceeded to just constantly drop everything over and over. The bus driver had noticed me at this point and was just shaking his head, staring at me. I must have dropped everything a few times before I got on the bus. Then while on the bus paying for my ticket, I dropped pretty much everything again. I knew I had embarrassed myself at this point, so I was super nervous when I got on the bus. I had heard quite a few people laughing and could feel their staring gaze in the back of my head. Worst part of it was the people who laughed the most were some colleagues from work. I didn't even know them. I work in a call center, so there are hundreds of people where I work that I do not know. They ended up pranking me in work by walking past me and pretending to drop things as a joke. It was funny in the end, but every time I think about the situation on the bus, I have a feeling of deep humiliation. Story 50. A couple of years back, I had just gotten out of my first serious relationship of 2 years, and I was foolishly trying to be more okay with it than I actually was. So I started seeing this young woman who, as it turns out, was in a similar situation. She was in all manner of speaking a lovely, attractive, compassionate, and smart partner. She took a trip to Paris during our dating and sent me a postcard. Very sweet indeed. We dated for like 2 months or something. I had an epiphany of sorts whilst we were having relations at my place, something along the lines of, "This is fun, but something is definitely lacking here," which made me realize that I am not very emotionally attached to her, even after the time we'd spent together, and to me the emotional attachment makes that intimacy much more wonderful. Well, during the afterglow, while we laid naked in my bed, she says something like, "I'm really starting to fall for you." And this hits me hard. This is the first blow of guilt and embarrassment. I realize that I cannot, in clear conscience, keep dating her if I'm not emotionally on the same level as her. But also, if I bring this up now, I'm kind of the biggest dirtbag on earth. So I decided just not to make the situation any worse and wait until the next day and meet her up again and tell her face to face. Apparently, I have the poker face of a guilty toddler because she saw right through me. She starts asking me what's wrong and pesters me to open up until about 30 minutes of trying to dodge and dismiss the question, I spill the beans. So there we are in my bed, in our birthday suits after coital bliss, and I start telling her about how I realize now that I might not be quite where she is at the moment emotionally, and I don't want to lead her on. I tell her I'm so sorry. I completely understand if she wants to break up with me. She weighs her options and decides to break up. Fine. This decision, however, leads to different difficulties. It was in the middle of the night, in the cold, windy and rainy, a Finnish autumn. I'm not going to shove her into the weather in the middle of the night after just having intimate time with her and forcing her to dump me butt naked. She says she's going to leave for her place anyway, which luckily was within walking distance. And I don't know what possesses me to offer to walk her to the place, but I do, and she doesn't decline. So off we go. I grab an umbrella and I walk with her, whilst holding the umbrella solely above her head, letting myself get wet. We walk about 30 minutes whilst I try to ease the tension by trying to small talk unsuccessfully a couple of times. With each failed attempt, the situation just gets worse. We finally reach her building. She turns around and says to me to wait outside as she has a couple of things with her. I had completely forgotten I had let her borrow a book of mine, and she is going to return them to me. She goes upstairs and leaves me outside. I crouch into a fetal position in hopes of just slipping into the ground forever, and think if she eviscerates me with a kitchen knife, it will be my just dessert. What she comes back with is much worse. It was as if the universe wanted to humor itself by choking me with a twisted sense of irony. I felt my life turn into a stand-up sketch on that exact second when I realized what she had with her. It had been my birthday fairly recently, and she knew I have a hobby in reading old-fashioned etiquette books and guides. She had gone to a bookshop in Paris and gotten me a birthday present. The present was a book called Manners for Men. Story 51. So I go to school in Ireland, and they're pretty strict on uniform. One teacher in particular was super strict. He always made us put on blazers before we were even in his classroom. I joined this new school in second year, and I pretty much had been there just long enough to make friends and even a boyfriend. I was about 14. So one day, my whole Irish class are throwing down bags and blazers and throwing them on ASAP so as to not be late for class. In such a rush, a couple of us mix them up, which is usually fine. They're all the same, and no one particularly cares about blazers, seeing as this is the only class they were required for. However, this specific time, I was on my period and kept my pad in my blazer pocket, which I had completely forgotten about. I still didn't realize that I had the wrong blazer, so I went into class. Class goes fine until my boyfriend pulls a pad out of the pocket of the blazer he's wearing, yells in disgust, and proceeds to throw it across the room to another boy who opens it and throws it again. This goes on all class until it's left on the floor, trampled. The whole time, I'm just trying not to go bright red and dying inside. Because back then, periods were all shameful and gross. No, can't mention it. And I was crazy shy and anxious being in a new school. And if that wasn't bad enough, I had to go text my boyfriend and ask for my blazer back, which in turn made him feel like crap for embarrassing me. Story 53. I was home alone for a week, parents and siblings overseas. I think I was about 16 at the time. Anyway, I used to leave the front door unlocked so friends could come and go. One day I'm taking a shower, and after drying myself, I still had a rager and thought, I wonder if I can hang my wet towel on it. Turns out I could, so I was like, oh yeah, celebratory lap around the house. As I step out of the bathroom and nothing but a towel hanging off my junk, I turn the corner into the hallway. And there's my old man neighbor, standing there, holding up a huge fish. Our neighbor Barry had an old used ambulance we renovated, so he could take it around the country and go fishing, and he would be back like 3 or 4 times a year. So with both of us just standing there, me in absolute shock and him in perfectly maintained stillness, we held eye contact for about 10 seconds before he finally says, without breaking eye contact, mind you, "Where do you want this?" The only reply I could muster was, "The sink," at which point I started to slowly back away. Mind you, this entire time, my stuff had somehow managed to stay strong, so there was no big reveal. But from that point on, every time I backed out of the driveway and saw Barry in the front yard doing whatever it was he did in the front, he would smile, wink, and blow a kiss at me, and I would die a little on the inside. Barry, you a-hole. Story 54. Oh gosh, I just remembered one. It was a physical ed class, and I sat next to a girl who sat next to a teacher's desk. Teacher was standing up preaching his lesson, and the whole time, girl is talking to a friend behind her. He turns to me and tells me to be quiet. But I respond, I didn't even say anything. Continues his lesson while girl continues to talk again. He turns around and yells at me to stop talking before he writes me up. I got scared because he was in the military and his voice was loud when he yelled at me. And when I panic, my voice goes up a few octaves and I get a little louder on the verge of tears and I said, "It's not even me!" Gio stares at me, completely silent. As I took the blame, he continues to shout at me about how he already warned me to stay quiet and writes me up. The whole class just stared at me, and he sent me out into the hall for talking back, door wide open. I had to sit outside for about 5 to 10 minutes before he called me back inside, and at this point I was a sobbing mess. My face was red and snot were covering my hands. Of course, I heard the boys laughing, telling a girl next to him, "Oh crap, she's crying." Everyone just stared at me. The class was completely quiet that day, but I had about 4 other classes to sit through with my big, fat, puffy red eyes. The girl never apologized to me, but the friend says he regrets not saying anything. Still, one of the worst days of my life in high school, and I think it was my freshman year too. Story 55. When I was just entering puberty, my body blossomed very awkwardly. At age 11, I was wearing a C-cup bra, and I was on the chubby side. I did my best to hide my body because it was so awkward, and I was in Little League soccer, and my dad was the coach of our team. So he made me goalie for a bit, and I had to wear a big goalie shirt. When it came time to change out kids, my dad decided to help me take off the goalie shirt. He accidentally grabbed my jersey too and pulled both over my head and started walking away, leaving 11-year-old me with awkwardly large boobs and my belly exposed. I looked up and the first pair of eyes I met was a boy in the class below me, and it hit me there that boys were seeing me in my bra. I yelled at my dad for what felt like forever before he turned around, realized what happened, and waddled back over to me to hand me my shirt. I spent the rest of the game laying on the bench with my head in my mom's lap. I actually blocked out that memory until about 6 years later when my classmate brought it up, and it was like a punch in the face to suddenly remember it and all the humiliation that came with it. Story 56. I'll preface this by saying I grew up in a small, rural town in North Carolina. We didn't get a lot of foreigners, and the ones we did get were usually Mexican. So I had never met anyone from an African country before, or to better phrase that, I had never met anyone or overheard anyone talking who openly stated they were from Africa. Also, somehow it never occurred to me that African regions would have their own accents, and that they would sound different from people on other continents. It was one of those things I just never stopped to think about. But anyway, I had to stay in psychiatric hospital when I was 17, which was in a much bigger city and thus much more diverse. One of the nurses had this distinctive way of talking that I had heard before a few times and instinctively associated with being mentally handicapped or having a speech impediment. He was talking to us as a group about him wanting to help troubled kids and why he went into that field. My stupid idiot butt self legitimately asked him if his condition caused a lot of obstacles in getting where he was, and how he overcame them. There was a long, confused silence before he asked what I meant, and I said something about the way he talked. That's when one of the other girls butted in and pointed out that he was African, and I felt like such an a-hole. Story 57. Second grade, Catholic private school. Really need to crap and teacher won't let me go. After raising my hand and asking like 5 times, I finally jump out of my seat, sprinting for the door, apologizing as I ran out the door, down the hallway, into the bathroom, the stall. Just as I think I've made it, I crap my pants as I'm pulling them down. Now I'm sitting on the toilet with pants full of poop around my ankles. Not solid crap that can be cleaned out, but my pants are soaked through. My legs are covered, and 7-year-old me has no clue what to do. I'll never forget the smell of that crap or the look of it. I don't know what I had eaten, but it was full of red lumps and looked like bright red cranberries. I'm just waiting there for someone to come in that I can ask to go get the teacher. It seems like forever, but finally another boy comes in and says he's going to get my teacher. But he was more full of crap than my pants were, because I'm in there for another eternity before my teacher finally comes to check on me. With no change of clothes, I have to wait for my aunt to bring me a change of pants. Since both my parents were at work, the teacher, my aunt, the principal, they all kept telling me to just go back to class. But I refused. Kids can be so cruel, and I knew what they all knew what happened. Plus, my aunt brought me a red pair of pants when our school uniform was dark blue. I knew that would bring extra attention to the fact that my blue pants were covered in crap. The next day, everybody was laughing at me over it and called me very horrible names, and mean private school kids save up waiting for a kid to crap themselves. Ha ha ha. The only good thing that came out of it is that nobody ever had to ask my teacher more than once to go use the bathroom again. Then, the Challenger launch was a few days later, and everybody forgot about my explosion, but I will never forget their sacrifice. Story 58. 3 friends of mine were throwing a housewarming party for their new house. They thought it would be fun to make it in attire, just for the heck of it. So they said it would be like a gala, really pretty dresses, that kind of style. At first they made me not want to attend, because I had just come home from a road trip and I wasn't feeling dressy up. Long story short, some other friends convinced me to come. I dressed up in a form-fitting emerald green dress, spaghetti straps that I'd only worn twice at a banquet and wedding. I rarely ever wear heels, but I decided to go big or go home. I walk up to this party, a gal opens the door, and to my horror, I see a kitchen full of dudes, all of which I've never met, in t-shirts and gym shorts, girls in shorts and tanks. I'm going home, I said to the girl who opened the door, but she urged me to at least enter and put my cheese and crackers on the table. I'm a very outgoing and goofy, no-shame type of person, but that was the most embarrassing moment. That walk of pure shame and awkwardness as I was screaming inside to myself, "Run! Get out! Now!" Finally, a few seconds later, of what felt like an eternity, the girl who planned the prank on me revealed she brought me a change of clothes. But still, I was very humbled. Definitely wanted the ground to swallow me up there. Story 59. I was late 20s and going to college. I was doing some online dating and met this smoking hot gal. Well, we had done stuff for a couple of weeks and she came to pick me up from college. This was different. She had this super cute redhead with her and she kept looking at me and turning away. Mind you, I've never had much experience in the dating realm, had even less experience with women in general. So we are headed back to my friend's place with the redhead riding with us. Suddenly my friend starts talking about liking photos when guys are fun. She was showing her pictures on her phone and the redhead keeps looking at me. We get to the house and things start to get weird. My friend asked if I looked back at her when she got out of the car. Confused, I said, "No, was I supposed to?" She said, "Well, the old couple got a food flash, then, okay." We are inside, and my friend disappears into another room, and the redhead is with me, talking to me about guys' junk, and she's fiddling with her sweater. My friend emerges from the other room and asks, "What's going on?" To which I reply, "We're just talking." 20 minutes later, I'm talking about what to do, and my friend says, "All right, let's just take you home so you can do your homework and I can get some rest." Confused, I ask, "What about doing something here?" She said, "Nope, let's just go, I'm tired." It wasn't until I was married and my wife told a friend of hers about our intimate life, and the friend made it clear that she knew the details and seen photos, well, then it was very obvious that I'd missed out on my only chance at a threesome. Maybe. Story 60. A chicken choir called me and I quote, "an effing idiot because I clapped my hands jokingly a few seconds longer than everyone else when our lunch break was announced. That wasn't the embarrassing part. What was embarrassing was that I just ended up storming out of the room like super angry. I got so mad that I was shaking so much that I couldn't coherently express myself due to the vibrations in my body screwing with my vocal cords. Well, you have to keep in mind is I can't sing. I was sort of forced into choir, and it's filled with people who either don't like, such as this chick, or people I don't know. And now the people I don't like have more of a reason to pick on me, and people I don't know have more of a reason to not know me. Most embarrassing part was how overreacty it was. I mean, I thought I was past this stuff and whatever, but just everything that happened that day screwed me up. The effing idiot comment was the straw that shot the camel's brains out. Story 61. Not me, but this happened to a friend in my class. High school, junior year. We had a speech that was a huge grade for 3 classes: English, Science, and Social Studies. It was our pod. Anyways, you have to do your speech in front of some teacher, judges with your group. It's supposed to be 15 minutes long with a computer presentation. Anyways, everyone is waiting to present, nervous as F because this is worth so much of our grade, and the first group gets called into the room to present. People are waiting outside the door, waiting to ask the first group what kind of questions the teacher asked. You have to do a full Q&A at the end. All of a sudden, my friend is being dragged out of the classroom unconscious by his legs, and people are like, "Holy crap, these judges must be insane." Turns out during his speech, he locked his knees and not only passed out, he landed on the laptop that their presentation was on and broke it. It doesn't end there. The bell for the other students rang, so while the nurses was pushing him around in a wheelchair, literally every student was staring at him. When he told me the full story, I had tears in my eyes. I was just so surprised by his bad luck. Happy part of the story, though, they didn't have to redo their presentation and got a 95. Story 62. Might get overlooked, but my time to shine a bit. To give some background, I will say I work at a pharmacy place that will not be named, so I'll just say I work in the front of the store while a pharmacy does their own thing in their area. Since I was fairly new, I hadn't really met or talked to the pharmacy staff. I'm fairly reserved at work and kinda shy to introduce myself. Also, I only really talked to front staff. I was watching an NBA game on my phone during my lunch break at a new job I had started only a few weeks in. Typically, there's no one ever eating lunch with you due to a small staff, so your lunch break goes unbothered most of the time. Keep in mind, I was wearing a single AirPod on my right ear, while the only door was facing my left ear. Anyway, so the game starts getting good, and I'm usually someone who becomes loud at sports games. The moment my team hits a game winner, I naturally clap with joy as I let my guard down, thinking I was alone. That was also the moment a pharmacy staff came in. I guess when I clapped, she jumped up and kinda gasped in fright. She kinda asked, "What are you doing?" Being the nervous person I am, all I could do was stutter and say sorry, as if I was guilty of something. She quickly got all her stuff and just ran off. I've been at this job for 3 months now, and every time we make eye contact, she looks the other way. Story 63. I have a ton of these, all equally embarrassing. I remember being in first grade and realizing in the middle of class that my shirt was on backwards. So I go to change it the right way around, and the a-hole principal decides, of course, to visit the classroom at that exact time and stands right next to me and yells, "Is this what you do in class?" So much shame. Then there's the time I was at a birthday party for the daughter of my mom's friend. I must have been around 7-ish. Somehow or other, the birthday girl's dress came up, and I wanted to do the whole, "You don't look good, you look great." But as soon as I said, "You don't look good," my mom out of nowhere just grabs me and covers my mouth, because that's totally a normal thing to do. The girl looks horrified, and I somehow squirm out of my mom's grasp and start the line over again, and this time I get the same thing out, "You don't look good," and then my mom clams her hand over my mouth again and literally drags me backwards into another room. The birthday girl's crying at this point. That's really all I have memory of. Dang it, Mom. Anytime I brought it up years later, she would always deny it ever happened. But it's as fresh in my mind now as it was that day, and it's totally something her crazy, stupid butt would do. I could think of way more if I want to keep ruining my day. Story 65. So in my high school, our senior project was a paper and a presentation. We were told that if we wanted to take our paper to a panel of judges, that would grill the heck out of us. We'd get a bonus to our grade and basically get a good score, regardless if you answered the questions well or not. I had terrible grades in high school, so I took them up on the offer. Huge mistake. I was the last one in the classroom, so the first one to present. Now, let me tell y'all something. Public speaking is my biggest fear. I have pretty bad anxiety, so it always makes my entire body start shaking, and I tear up automatically. First one presenting, worst nightmare. But I persist. I go up there as calmly as I can, inform them of the subject of my paper, and they start grilling me. Except the questions they're asking aren't anything I was prepared for. I'm in complete shock, and I have to keep saying, "I do not have that information at hand, sir," to everything they ask. Halfway through, my stomach starts to turn and my vision tunnels. I'm trying to keep pushing through, but my hearing is starting to go. I ask him to repeat a question right before I drop like a sack of potatoes. I just straight up fainted in front of my classmates and these teachers. When I came to, I realized what had happened and wanted to immediately die, especially with one other teacher fussing over because he was deeply concerned and thought my heels were the reason I fainted. After the panel, the story spread around school like wildfire. Everyone knew, including people I'd never even met before. Apparently, one of the teachers still talks about it to his senior classes every year. Story 66. Accidentally mocked an autistic child in front of my entire class. My school has a long-held tradition of making bizarre noises in the hallways outside the classrooms for exceptionally boring teachers, in noble attempts to temporarily restore the students' collective will to live. My French teacher is generally considered the dullest in the school, and as such, we get a lot of people making monkey noises and rapping, etc. outside of our classroom door. We laugh, and then the noise-making students go on their merry way. Anyway, one day one kid mooed. I laughed. Nobody else did. My French teacher shot me a look as if I just drowned a kitten in front of her. A teacher who I didn't know came up from behind this kid, came into the classroom and said, "Can I speak with you in the hall for a second? I'd like you to meet someone." So I stood up and she introduced me to the kid who mooed. "Hi, I'd like you to meet Darren. Darren is autistic. That means that he learns differently than you do, and we don't appreciate you making fun of him." I apologized repeatedly and profusely. I said I knew what autism was. My best friend of 12 years has it, and I've been defending him since we were 5, although I didn't explain all that. And of course I didn't know that this was the case with Darren, but she wasn't hearing any of it. She just explained autism and why my behavior was unacceptable in front of my whole class, while my French teacher continued her horrified stare, and I sweated through all of my clothes. Then, during lunch, more and more teachers and security came up to lecture me again while I was eating, and didn't stop until I actually started crying out of shame and frustration. Story 67. In 7th grade, my parents took my brother and me out to dinner at a nice steakhouse for good report cards. Our caffeine and sugar intake was closely limited to special occasions, so I'm getting pretty hyper from the Coke I was drinking. The restaurant had Trivial Pursuit cards on the table, so my brother and I were quizzing one another. I got this science question. What does it mean if you're polyorchid? Well, I knew it meant you had more of something than usual, so I went with this response. It means you've got more than 2 balls. Well, I was a little louder than I should have been because I'm hyper from soda. My brother informed the table that it is in fact what it means if you're polyorchid, but Dad is uncomfortable because we're starting to get a little rowdy, and he's shifting in his seat and adjusting his napkin across the table from me. So I elbow my brother and stand up and lean across the table as I say, "Hey, Dad's checking to see if he's polyorchid." And as I laughed, I also farted. Loudly. Not only that, it looked like I had stood up, stuck my butt out, and farted as loud as I could on purpose. Not what happened, but I'm sure it's what it looked like to everyone around us. I mean, pretty much everything is embarrassing to a 7th grade girl, but this, I was mortified. I thought my dad's head was going to pop off. He growled, "You're excused." And then we couldn't pay our bill fast enough. My brother and my mom are dying laughing. For me, it was a cry or laugh, and they were already laughing, so I just went with that. And now with this story, my family will find me on Reddit. It was years before my dad ever found any humor in the situation. Story 68. So I lived in an old house that had been converted into apartments. There was a lobby with a door that was always locked. You had to open it for any guests. I invited this girl over for a hangout with some friends. She was really cool and sweet and had kind of idolized me when we ran cross-country together, since I was a few years older. So I had this experienced former mentor vibe going into the situation. I had ordered Chinese food prior to this, and when she texted me saying that she was at the front door, I ran right out the apartment door and stared down the stairs, tray of rice, message, and goodness in hand. As I start down the stairs, my heel slips. You know the feeling. Normally, it would result in me catching myself and having some bonus adrenaline coursing through my veins, but not that night. My heel slipped. I proceeded down the stairs, butt thumping down each individual step. Meanwhile, my hand, food in hand, had launched my tray of food into the air. Rice rained down on me as I unceremoniously crashed down the stairs all the way to the bottom. So I'm sitting there, my tailbone incredibly sore, rice everywhere, rice in my bra, rice in my hair, rice effing everywhere, and I look up to see the girl I had invited over, staring horrified. Having seen everything through the little window in the door to the lobby, so much shame, so much pain. Story 69. My life is just a series of embarrassing moments, let me tell you. When I was an only child, I was watching TV with my older cousin. He was a few years older, and we got into a fight for the remote. He continuously claimed that he didn't have the remote, but it couldn't be found anywhere. So being the child that I was, I decided to search his pockets. And as I put my hands inside his pockets, I got a hold of something that I thought was the remote, so naturally I pulled. Never have I ever seen my cousin get so embarrassed. He shouted at me, telling me that it wasn't the remote, and stormed out of the room. Only after 5 years did I realize what it was that I really grabbed that day. And that realization hit me when I was out having dinner with my family. And I couldn't face that cousin for quite a long time after that. There was another time in university when we had an acoustic evening. I had a huge crush on this guy who was one of the organizers of that event. I was pretty excited for it, so I got high as a kite before going. As I arrived, I saw that my crush was still busy in making arrangements, busy going here and there and talking to people. I saw him near the stage, and my seat was quite far from it, so the view wasn't really clear, given the state I was in. I started talking to him in gestures. We were having a full-blown conversation by just mouthing words and flailing hands. Turns out he wasn't talking to me at all, but the people that were sitting in the row right in front of me. After a while, he noticed me moving and gave me a really weird look and waved at me. Even now, after months of dating him to this day, I am embarrassed about it. Also, when I was in middle school, I was a really fat girl, and I somehow managed to literally fall on the head of one of the boys from my class. I mean, I was literally sitting on his face, and not in a good way. Story 70. I'm usually very punctual with work and school. I was offered work with a professor over the summer. I just had to email after the end of the semester. I emailed him on Saturday night, saying I could start Tuesday, since I'd be busy all day Monday because my dad was in town. He emails me back early Monday morning asking if I can meet on Tuesday at 1 p.m. to discuss it. I missed the email because I was driving. Come Wednesday, I checked my email because I found it strange that I hadn't received any notification of a response yet. I saw that I missed his message and replied to it, apologizing profusely and suggesting we meet the next day. He responded that 2 p.m. was okay on Thursday and later changed it to 12:30 p.m. I responded to both emails saying that I was okay with them, and we ultimately agreed on 12:30. Come the next day, I was totally fine and aware of the meeting when I woke up. My roommates were up earlier than is typical. I usually couldn't expect to see them until 2 or so because they like to stay up late. We got to talking. Then one said, "Let's play The Binding of Isaac." And I totally lost track of time because my brain says they're all up, so it's later in the day. I agree, and we play for a couple of hours. Then I realized halfway through a dungeon that I had a meeting. I looked at my phone and saw 12:33. I freaked the heck out. I was and still am embarrassed as I drove to campus and got to his office at 12:43, and he wasn't there. My coworker had been texting me and calling me, but my phone was still on silent from the previous night, so I missed everything. Also, it was in my room charging because I forgot to plug it in before going to sleep. I got there and my coworker was laughing about it all. He filled me in on the new information from the meeting. He said it was very short, but the professor did stress that he was looking for a serious commitment and asked if I even have time to work on the project. I don't know the response, but my coworker said that now Professor probably thinks he's the punctual one when it's usually me and he's usually late. This happened this week. I don't know if I'll still have work, but it seems like my coworker's backing me up, so probably still do. I just have to read some stuff in preparation, then be early to the next meeting. I cannot let this happen again. I just want to crawl into a hole and die. Being late is so embarrassing to me because of how disrespectful it is. I hate when people are late to anything we agree on. So now for me to be late twice in a row with the same person makes me feel like a genuine idiot. Story 71. In elementary school, we had to do the same play that it seems like every kid does. The Great American Heroes and Their Roles. They even depicted a similar looking play from a scene in Big Daddy, which makes me think it was a pretty common thing for youngsters. Well, I got the role of Squanto. Who's Squanto, you may ask? Yeah, no effing clue. Which leads me to my story. I wasn't a very studious kid going through school, and I figured that I could procrastinate the little project and be good to go. I waited until the night before our project's due date to try and study and finish my poster board I needed. Turns out, there wasn't a lot of info about Squanto. So the next day my poster looked terrible, and I remember getting a bad grade on it because I clearly didn't know what Squanto did. The following day, we had to do the play and present our historical figures. We did one during the day for all the other kids in school and another at night for all the parents. Well, the first show with every kid in our school in attendance was the bad one. We had to go up to the microphone and list off some basic info about our character and explain what they did. Since my research was terrible, I had no idea what I was about to say to a school gymnasium full of 200 of my peers. I walked up to the microphone and it went like this. Hi, my name is Squanto. I was born on August 20th. I helped all the, oh crap. While the dialogue that I said wasn't horrible, it was what came next that crushed me. I was extremely nervous and defeated after not being able to get out a single thing. So I hung my head in shame, and I hugged my head so low that my forehead bounced off the microphone. The microphone immediately screeched feedback noises as soon as it fell to the ground. It tumbled right off the stage from my face. The ringing continued for about 10 seconds until someone finally unplugged it to get the sound to stop. This left me as a 7-year-old standing on stage with every single kid in my school laughing at me because I just super slammed my forehead into a microphone and sent it off the stage. It took about 5 minutes to get everything in the play going again, and I had to stand on the stage the entire time. I lost my elementary school girlfriend that day, and all the dignity that a 7-year-old can possess. My family thought it was hilarious, though. Story 72. Back when I was 15, I was in a church school for Mormons. That was before normal school. For whatever reason, this day, we were all in the chapel practicing music for some performance we were going to do at church on Sunday. Keep in mind, most kids there weren't into music at all. They were just part of the church school and were forced to sing in the choir. We are all waiting around in the chapel, waiting for the conductor to get there. And since I had been playing guitar for about 2 years at that point, most people there assumed I knew a bunch about music theory. Spoiler alert, I didn't and don't. One of my classmates asked me what the 2 clefs were on sheet music. Feeling confident in my knowledge of music theory and saying loud enough so my whole class could hear, I responded, "The top one is the treble clef, and the bottom one is the clitora clef." Why I said that the bass clef was the clitora clef, I have no idea. I just remember the weirdest looks from my classmate. Nobody ever talked with me about it afterwards, but I know they knew that wasn't the name of the clef. I proceeded to look up what a clitora clef was when I got home from school, and that day, well, needless to say, I only got articles of female genitalia. All right, guys, that concludes our horrendously embarrassing stories. You know, I didn't add a lot of commentary in most of these because I was just trying to let the humiliation speak for itself, and it kind of tied itself up in a nice bow. But I hope you guys enjoyed it, and if you have any embarrassing stories you would like to share, feel free to drop them down below. We will read them, we will laugh at them, and we will share, and perhaps we'll even find closure. But thanks again for hanging out with me through all these stories, and we will see you in the next episode.